Are we missing any teams? So we have 4. We're missing 1 team, and that's the team with closing opposition. Okazaki. Some paper, please. 4 sheets. And who would like to volunteer at the time? My name is Shras Qureshi, and I'm your chair for today. If we could go through the teams and just establish the speaking order and preferred pronouns. Are you Iron Man?
No, my friend is coming now.
Okay, well,
the toilets. Yeah.
Come. Great. So in opening government, who's speaking first?
Carol, Hiorday.
And yourself?
Robert Hiorday.
In opening his opposition, who's speaking first?
Josep. There's no difference.
And
Karl, no preference.
closing government.
No preference.
And closing opposition, who's speaking first?
And Arda is first.
ARDA.
Yes. I prefer your day.
Okay. Right. My wins today are and as I said, Shiraz, no preference. The motion that stands before the House is this House believes the WTO should allow developing countries to impose policies aimed at protecting domestic industries, even at the expense of harming international trade. And it gives me great pleasure to call on the Prime Minister to propose the case that stands in their name. Hear, hear.
Okay, so what are the goals of the WTO? To benefit all the economy due to the rise, for example, the rise of competitiveness in the global market, and also to benefit and rise the whole level of the economic development throughout the world. And we, in this case, with this motion, we do not talk about shutting the international trade completely. We believe we should give the domestic market a chance to fight back to the more developed markets, more developed countries that can impact or control over those developing countries. So what we will give you is why the domestic companies need time to develop and compete with the international like companies, the big corporation, and why this international trade is a modern colonialism, and why it's a way of controlling of setting a control of more developed countries over the the developing ones. So for model definitions, we as for those policies, we for example take tax reliefs, we take some kind of subsidies, we take the programs to give know-how and knowledge to the to the domestic companies that are developing, and we want to the state to give time to develop and give a helping hand to those smaller developing companies.
How can you protect or develop a domestic industry without protecting the domestic market, such as imposing customs duty? You have to put some.
Okay, so we believe that's also a example of how you will have how the domestic market. So we do understand, we do accept that in some cases we will hurt the international trade because the companies that would set in their country will find another one that has for example smaller customs. But we are totally agreed to that because of those two reasons that I will list. So the first one is we should also say about the status quo, so that we have two kinds of companies fighting for the market in those developing countries, right? So we've got big international corporations and smaller domestic companies that fight over the same group, those people. If you let them compete freely on this on those developing markets, the domestic is bound to lose, right? Because they have no knowledge and know-how of the big corporation, they have no capital the big corporation got, and they will be absolutely destroyed. So if you let them compete straight away, or they will get smashed. And what they need to develop and actually be able to compete with the international corporation is this time and helping hand of the developing countries in the WTO companies that have that help, so that they have the time. For example, they have 20 years of tax relief, the tax that big companies still have to pay. They will actually be able to compete. They will, because of the money that stays with the company, and grow and expand. And in a time, they will have the ability to actually compete for the domestic market without the helping hand of the state. So we believe when we introduce this policy, there is some kind of set amount of time that will have to be like it won't be forever. That's what I meant to say. Any POIs from the opposition? Okay.
Gladly. I'm still not getting what is exactly that you're doing. Are you sending those outsources out, or are you enhancing the local companies somehow, or what's your plan?
Yeah. So we do not ban them, and anyway, I don't really get your point. So we are giving some kind of like relief, some kind of subsidy to the companies. We are not banning any international companies from getting in, so they still can compete. But the environment they have to compete it's a bit harsher to support the domestic companies. I hope that that clarifies it. So, and the second thing is this neo-colonialism, because the problem is that the economic supervisory or the economic overseeing is nowadays is the way of controlling the people and the resources in the developing countries. So it's a way to ask we know from the history that the more developed countries did feed on the smaller one because they could firstly sell the goods there, and they also could take the profit, the money, and the resources from those countries. So the problem is if we let, as I already explained, as it will kill the domestic companies, smaller, that are not given a chance to develop. It will kill the companies in the whole country, and they all money and profit will always go back to the more advanced, more progressed economics and countries. And the problem is if we don't act as soon as possible, it will set up the environment. So the companies will develop in those countries those international corporations, and it will be be harder to change like later in time. It's we think, as our principle, we believe it's very unjust that because someone had, for example, because of invitations, because of some kind of economic development, had a head start and has more knowledge, more money, that it can control and influence and take the profits or resources from other countries. And for all those reasons, I beg you to, I'm proud to propose it.
Thank you very much, and I'd now like to call on the first speaker for opening opposition to oppose the case.
Do you guys mind if I switch on the light? Or if you do that?
Okay, so we'll know how to do that. Everything okay?
Yeah.
I'm ready. Annabelle, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Perfect, ready when you are.
So, goals of the World Trade Organization isn't only to oversee some countries' economy, it's to oversee trade, world trade, and this is the debate we're going to have over here. Now, firstly, some rebuttal. I have still an issue with the plan. I'm not sure how is it going to work or why is it there, but like we have insufficient argumentation over here. Why is it necessary in the first place? Why is it necessary to have this kind of plan to, I don't know, either subsidize or relieve local companies, or, as I said before, make trade barriers as well? So the plan isn't so certain even. What is it that they're going to do? And the second question is it going to work as well? Okay, let's make a relief for the local company. Their argumentation about the modern colonialism is still going to carry on. H&M is still interested in a cheap workforce over there, and so is Bangladesh. So are they, because otherwise they would change their labor laws. Otherwise they would say that these conditions are not okay and would change them. But politically they're neither not interested, because otherwise they don't have any chains for the money. They at the moment give out labor to get the money, but they haven't shown us that the developing country will get the money back if they're cutting off an industry. What are they going to do with all those employees? How are they going to exchange these employees now working in the textile company? How are they going to exchange this work for them? How are they going to give enough capital for them to survive? In this case, if they're trying to cut out their production. Now, the second thing is that about the change, then where or how is it going to come? Like, how are they going to change the condition of this country? And how is it going to be sufficient to compete in the world with other countries? Now, the question about domestic outsourcing or the current companies, that firstly, H&M at the moment uses the current company for outsourcing. The current company takes the employees and sells the product to H&M. So it's another company already. So it's well, legally another kind of issue. And the second thing is that if we take this H&M away from the rich producer away, then how are they going to prove that now they will get the money, or now they will be richer, or now they will get morely paid for the work they're doing at the present moment? So I think the case is delusional. The case is delusion and hoping for economics, but economics doesn't show out from the case. What does economics say to us? Well, first theory of economics, of trade policies, is that we have a relative price advantage in countries that have place to produce something that they're good at. The logic behind that is that if you're good at something, keep doing that. If you're not good at something, please don't protect it. Start doing something else that would be beneficial for your country. Now, what we want in this case is that those very same countries would turn to those things that are beneficial. If we have a problem that's highlighted at the present moment, in a second, and a market that is not actually working, and they would need to protect themselves, let's say miners, no one is willing to give miners money in this country for product aid, but we can use those very same miners if we see that this market doesn't work. No one wants our code for another kind of job that actually would have advantage in the international market. Then we should take the chance and use it, as we see after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and I will explain this example later. Yes?
I thought it obvious, but WTO has control over domestic policies of its members, right? So we are talking about allowing the countries to make those policies. So you cannot say that they are not interested in this, because if they are not, they will not change. But we are allowing them to make those changes.
Yes, they're not interested. to change the labor laws because they're getting profits from them. Now you're saying that they still get profits. But how? How will they get profits if they're not using the cheap labor? If they're making some more regulations so the workforce will be more expensive? It's not logical. It doesn't work that way. If you make a law that makes things more expensive, they will actually be more expensive, rather than just hoping that now we can have a chance to compete in the markets. And now, back to economy. As the Soviet Union collapsed, there were different kinds of economies created. Firstly, liberal kind of economies that actually let the market make the changes, let the market to find the best product they can make, the most profitable product. Other kind of examples, Moldova, for example, Ukraine, had this very same problem that they held up to those old industries that actually were there and employed people. What has happened then that in comparison with Poland or Baltics, the Ukraine's economy isn't very well, isn't very good because they haven't made those liberal reforms showing that's what's the product that actually is good for them. Now, enough of the economy, more about the international trade. Now, World Trade Organization has an interest in this kind of case that different countries would have trade that would work actually. Now, this case over here leads to protectionism, which means that both of the countries, let's say neighboring countries, one producing product A, one producing product X. Now those two countries don't have the most efficient product. If the country one would produce the other product the other country is doing, and vice versa, it would be more effective. But now what's starting is that both of them want to protect their borders. Both of them want to protect their production. What's happening is that both of those countries make up barriers. Barriers that are not in interest in World Trade Organization because they are not the most effective way to actually make the trade. What is the most effective way is actually have this relative price advantage, that both of them would produce something that would be most effective for them. But now, their case is allowing both of the countries to start the fight over the prices, to start the fight over the production, because they need to protect their working force. Now, World Trade Organization needs to protect the trade which is most efficient. Most efficient because in this case, World Trade Organization is the only organization representing the most efficient trading policies. Now, in this case, it doesn't apply to it. And lastly, about employees themselves. Now, a lot of the developing countries have an issue of largely importing products. Now, if they're cutting off their own import market, which means that a lot of people work on the import market, if they're cutting that off, a lot of people working on the import market will also lose their jobs. Because now they don't have products to import because there's protectionism. They will have to do things that are not so sufficient or not so efficient to actually, for less money now than rather importing this. So we see that importing also is beneficial for a country and for employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech, and I'd now like to call on the second speaker for Open Government to continue proposing the case.
Okay, so what I will explain to you is that not all trade is good if the benefits of this trade don't benefit all the parties that are involved. And the second thing is that I will explain you why not all the companies won't disappear. The problem is that we don't have the local companies, and we need them, and we will help the local companies to be created. Rebuttal. So first of all, what is the plan? And I think that the government economical analysis show that will create more local companies and will allow them to develop, as my partner said. Generally speaking, why will it work? The countries that will be interested in it will do that. The countries that aren't won't. The only idea is that World Trade Organization allows them to do this in our motion because right now it has much influence over their domestic ideas in terms of the economics. Okay? And generally speaking, your whole case, very nice, Smith, focus on what is beneficial for you and only that. The problem is that for the USA, it is beneficial. I mean, not really, okay, for Germany, it's beneficial to create cars. It is beneficial to create things that, generally speaking, add a lot of value. So you buy cheap resources, you buy cheap labor, or you outsource it, and then you sell it for a much higher price. You create a huge value added. While on the other hand, right now, for the developing countries, because you don't give them space to develop, because you don't allow the local companies to be created, because you don't really allow them to develop any industries that add value, you force them to work in those low value added, generally speaking, things, companies like sweatshops or textiles, because they don't have the time to do that, okay? And no, the USA won't really start a trade war with Bangladesh or Thailand. The motion is mostly about giving a breathing space for those companies in those countries, so a Thailand company in Thailand, giving them some tax exemptions so they can at least develop and start a company. Because what is the problem right now, okay? We don't have local companies. And why is this a problem, okay? If I'm a rational customer, I can buy a thing from a local company, which is more expensive and it's worse quality. Or I can buy it from a global corporation and it's better and cheaper. And why is it better and cheaper? Because they have the capital, for example, to drive the prices down when they are entering the market. They can do the price dumping. They have the know-how and knowledge to do those things cheaply. They had the time to optimize the production, okay? They have all the possibilities to actually drive the unit price down. And yes, it is beneficial for the customer in this country in the short term. But in the long term, it is very harming, right? Because if you think about it, the local company will develop this country. And yes, their products aren't great right now, but the thing is that their management is local. So they understand this country, they understand their problems, and they can focus their products more on the local problems. It is run by the local management. They can't really evade the taxes. Maybe we can give them tax exemption, but that's our choice. While on the other hand, the big corporation has, generally speaking, the money, can use the legal companies to avoid those taxes. The local company will pay the local workers, and generally speaking, all the profits will stay in this country, while the big corporation will drive all that profit outside of the country. So if we have the local company and we give it time and, for example, tax exemptions, or we increase the prices of the foreign products by giving some tariffs, then the customers can buy the local ones, because now the prices of the foreign products become more expensive. And true, in the short term, they will lose some money. But in the long term, we get a country where we are starting to develop smaller companies who are like the backbone of our economy. And why is it so important? Because those small companies, like they're, I don't know, 5, 10, 20, 50 people, right? They don't have the resources to evade the taxes. Their profits stay in this country. They teach those people how to generally work in their companies, and it allows, and also like the workers start to earn paying, wages. So generally speaking, there is more money in this country. What that means, if there is more capital in this country, you can develop the economy better, and everyone will be richer in the long term. So what does it mean? In the short term, yes, people will suffer because they will buy a hairdryer for $15, not for $12. But in the long term, Thailand will become a better and richer country. Now, neocolonialism. What is the idea of neocolonialism? Look, the idea is that you are feeling exploited. You believe that someone can exploit you, and it's by force, by economy, by political interest. You feel, generally speaking, very vulnerable. You think that you don't make your choices, and there is some overseer, most likely from a different background, different culture, that can dominate you right now. And right now, this is exactly what the developing countries are feeling, because while the, okay, POI.
Last. Alright, you're telling us about that large companies have technology, have capital, have every chance to distribute the product and have a lot of product. Now, you're saying that local companies will do the same.
Question.
How will they have the same power
No,
to distribute?
what I'm saying is the American company can sell it all the world, but if we put the tariffs in Thailand, then their products become more expensive in Thailand, so the local products by relativity become cheaper for the customers because they can choose them on lower price compared to the foreigners, okay? Coming back to coloniality. So the thing is that, generally speaking, those foreign companies came years ago. They had the time to exploit the cheap labor, they had the time to take all the resources, they had the time to develop using these slave forces, they had the time to influence the governments, they had the time to use every political, military, and economical power to develop themselves as much as they can. They didn't play fair. And right now we expect the local companies and those developing countries to play fair towards the Western countries, towards those corporations. We believe that it's only fair if those companies, if those big corporations had this starting chance, had this neocolonialism going on, we should give also some help to the local ones to mitigate all those things that happened in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to call on the second speaker for opening opposition to continue opposing the case. Wherever you go. No, that thing in the middle.
Is there a problem?
No, it's
Okay. So we can start. Dear Mr. Speaker, we see that in this debate, the comparison here is when we'll allow these companies to open themselves, these industries, this states to open themselves up to potentially risk, foreign companies coming in and taking over their industries versus, isolating themselves, trying to build them up on their own, which is largely more beneficial to them, and that is the main focus of my speech and the main comparative I'm going to offer. But before that, few points of rebuttal to what we heard from the other side. They say that the current system does not allow them to create those value-added industries. They can't actually do those things that the Western countries or developed countries do so excellently. We see that this is ridiculous. When those states actually have a profitable market that would bring them, international benefit, and they can produce something successfully, they will do it. They will find a way to do it. They are interested in it. They can see it as a profitable market. They will take advantage of it. It's ridiculous to suggest that they will somehow be foolish enough not to actually use things that are beneficial to them. So when they actually have a market that's beneficial, they will use it and gain success out of it. The only reason they would protect those markets is if they are not as successful as them. If somebody in a foreign country can create it more successfully, more cheaply, more efficiently, etc. And in those cases, we see that they should not, hold their companies up falsely. More about that under my own point. Now, a quick point about, local companies are better because, they understand local situation or whatever. We see that that is also not always true. We see that, those largest companies with large resources can do background checks, and we see that when we want those products, to go out locally, just because your country has coal in it doesn't mean another company from another country who's mined coal for 200 years does not know how to do it, or does not know how to do it effectively or environmentally safe or whatever. So we see that, local companies are not smart there. Now, the main problem, they're talking about neocolonialism, and they're talking about, profits going out of the country. First of all, their entire principal point about neocolonialism, how people are feeling bad, about those foreign countries, we think it's not really important that they have never shown us an impact. Most of their case relies on the economic benefits of the country. They say that they want those companies to succeed, so we need to prove that it's better for them economically, not, feeling good or feeling bad. If people have more money, they usually feel better. So, it doesn't matter if the money is coming from the foreign company or their company, if they have more money, they can allow more things, people feel more happy. Now think about profits going out of that country, that, large foreign industries are coming and sucking all the money out of it. First of all, they have never proven this. They are saying it's happening. I've had no examples of this, and we see that this is not 100% true. We see that, of course, foreign companies go out to these countries with an idea of gaining a profit. Of course, why else would you go there? But that doesn't mean that the state they are going to is also automatically going to lose out on the system. We see that all, foreign companies often bring their development, bring their machines, bring their experts that teach things, and also pay those people money. They give them paychecks, and often they are larger than the ones they can get from their own country, but they are, still small compared to the Western country. So the Western country feels that they gain benefits because they pay low wages, but those people feel that they gain benefits because they get higher wages than they would have gotten otherwise, and that country now has more money in its system than what money they can use to do all those things they want, to develop those countries, to develop those states. So we see that, it is not factually true that those countries go out and suck the money out of the system and suck the money out of the state. We brought you an example of, Soviet Union collapsing. Many of previous Soviet countries, a lot of Western companies automatically moved in, came here to do their business, and those countries, succeeded off of that. But okay, now let's talk a little bit about, the comparative and, how we can guarantee better income for those companies, and, a few points of rebuttal probably under that as well. We see that, the current system of, allowing them, be free and, allowing them to actually, not giving them the chance to protect or cut themselves off is basically giving them guaranteed income of two reasons. No, thank you. We see that, first of all, we see that, they're mostly now producing only things that actually give them benefit. They are forced to now abandon those companies, they're forced to abandon those industries that are not beneficial, that are not, creating a benefit in the global market, so they're forced to abandon those. And, every state, finds a, tries to find a way to best exist in this world, so they will now turn to only to those parts of the industry that they're actually successful. And we see that, if they are not successful in enough industries, or, they have a workforce overflow, that now lose their jobs, outsourcing is excellent for them. They have the, their capital, their thing that they can use to gain benefit is their workforce. And we see that, they should use it in the most efficient way as possible. They should apply it to the way that, it can actually bring them benefit, not keep alive dead industries. Yes?
So you're saying that the companies share their knowledge, they patent it, and they are making money on. Developed countries get no knowledge and no machines from those foreign companies. They keep it to themselves.
No, that's just not true. It's not like, foreign companies go into a developed country, blindfold them and say, here's a machine, you don't learn how to use it, you will never get the knowledge, Often those people actually build those machines as well. So it's not like, they're keeping secrets from those people and, they're not teaching them how to do those things, how those markets work, they are inside that process, they're not using them as slave labor. And if they are, this is illegal anyway, and we do not have to protect this under this debate. But now, more about, let's talk about their system a bit more. We see that, keeping those weak and out-of-date industries alive is basically not an effective system. First of all, they are saying that by somehow, allowing those systems to exist on their own, they will somehow become more effective and more beneficial. That realistically makes no sense. We see that, if those companies now, yes, the local people might be forced to buy from a local company because it's now their cheapest option. But the local people are the only ones buying from it. So even if the local companies become rich from their system, if they become rich because they make the local people poor, they take their money away. They are forcing the local people to buy the more expensive product because the other one has been pushed out of the market. So in the long scheme, you're killing the market. You're killing the person who's actually going to buy those things, and eventually that company, either is going to sit on their pile of money and the state will fail, or they have to put that money back to those people and will just go around and around and around, but nothing will come in from the outside, so nothing can actually go up. The state cannot, gain money from an empty place. We see that this is the reason why when we want to punish countries in the international scale, we cut off their markets, because we see that this actually, hinders their progress, doesn't help them to develop. And we see that, we should not give the countries the opportunity to actually, punish themselves, to give them the choice to actually cut themselves off from the market and let them quietly die. We think they should, be part of the global market where everybody has a chance. Very glad to be on this side.
thank you very much for that speech. And I'd now like to call on the extension speaker, the side government, to extend the case to their side. I just remind you to be a bit quieter when you're talking. Everyone ready?
We believe that this debate has to conduct on the thought of the long term and how we bring this developing country to be developed and bring all the trade to be equal and fair, but only but as soon as possible that all these people, these countries will build their infrastructure, that they build the middle class that provide and strengthen the economy, and they will able to compete with the other countries, which they cannot do today. Basically, I'm going to have one point, a long one, how this motion is going to bring us more prosperity and basic things to the one who needs it the most, and we believe that this is the most important thing in the debate. A few points of rebuttal. So, just to be clear what it probably says, because it seems like on confusion, we're talking about tariffs, we're talking about a kind of a regulation about foreign company, everything that basically help the domestic industry. That's what the government side stand for, and obviously this is the trade-off. Some country cannot import to this country, and the domestic get benefits. This all thing of you cannot use a cheap forced labor. It's not really in this debate. Actually, it's on our side. This way, actually, you help the people in your country to bring money in, and not to bring money out. So, says they brought this as the liberal idea of that we want every country to do what they do best. First, the problem is they didn't prove the assumption that every country have something to offer, every country to do something as best, because we see today that more and more industry are knowledge based, so it's not bound to territories borders. The second thing it's basically I cannot think of one example of something that only one country good at, and no other developed country cannot do better with the more experience in everything. It's very little, like we say usually. And third, okay, so okay, the last thing that says that these people of the country are forced customers that now they can only purchase domestic. We say this is part in the long term when we have developed middle class. Basically, more people have valuable income to spend on more products. Now they will see that they can buy cheap outside of their country. The government will change. We're speaking of functioning democracy. They probably want the best for interest. We say that right now, and I get it in my point, it's the best interest of the country, and we want the government to act upon this interest. So how it's bring more prosperity? So country, in order to be a stable economy, consider a developed economy, have like wide middle class with business owner, but with the knowledge and running businesses all over there, on the field. It gives us experience, work job, and etc. Why we have to do it, we need people who can spend more to increase the private consuming and the private investment over the economy. The lower class sector can do it, and the wider
point of information
later. And the upper class obviously is too small and narrow, and obviously his consumption is low, and his investment is usually out of the country. So so that's what we want to do, and that's what we need for the country to get from the state of the developing to develop. And so right now, business, how it's worked, the life cycle of business, and this is something new in our case. It starts with an idea, and then someone who pursues this idea and start and look for investment to his idea. So already in this point, If you have no market for this idea, you probably will not get investment. If we limit the market and create market of countries that right now cannot import this product from outside, we already allow this business to go on this level. After that, you need to create a prototype, to bring it on. After a while, it's taking time until you get to stabilize profitability that give you, and only then, in this level, the business actually is right to be compete in a global arena, to be export, to develop if it's working. What's the problem? That we don't. Most of the business is good or not, they not even get to this level, to this point, because in the first case, all the global cooperation with all the benefits which are with huge size, ability to move around the globe, to find the most places, to use cheap labor force from other countries, etc. You just cannot develop in this country is able to get subsidies from strong country, because strong country doesn't need to do trade. They can use subsidies to give money directly to the companies and the people, get the same effect, but because they have money and the weak country not, but they don't obligate by that. No, thank you. So when the businesses are not in the last stage, we never come to this far. Okay, we're taking up.
Well, the topic itself, in the interest of debate, is saying we'll have to protect industries. Industry includes domestic and foreign companies, but your case, both of your cases, is speaking about companies, not industries.
Companies form industries, and let me see exactly the motion. Allow developing country to impose to end protecting domestic industries. It's basically everything that you create inside your country, right? And see exactly the difference between company. Usually you protect all companies. So what do we get? More businesses that we have that now can prosper, compete with each other. They said, no, now we have to buy more expensive stuff. You have inner competition in this country. It's a flag battle inside my speech. And what? Where's my okay? Thank you. My speech. So when we don't have it, basically we're getting a brain drain. These countries stick in the same position. They have a poor industry. They have higher rates of infant death. With a lot of damages. These people are the most the most of emphasis in this debate, and we give them exactly that and the fastest possible.
Thank you very much, and I'd now like to call on the speaker for closing opposition to extend the debate.
The main question is this debate: why, even if it goes impact and harm into international trade, we should provide a chance to fight back against global trade. Today, government bench only aim to some benefit to prove some benefits to local companies and how they developed. But they do not explain why we give some harm to global trade as a WTO. But we believe that their policy causes more harms into citizens of these developing countries, plus the citizens in developed countries and underdeveloped countries in many places. And secondly, only with global trade we can collect necessary experience into adapt global trade in the long run, we say. Let's start with first argument. Today, open governments say that we should give local companies a chance to fight back. But firstly, why local companies are better options rather than global ones? Why we need their development? We cannot take direct answer to this question. First, they produce products with low quality or high cost compared to global companies, and this situation cannot change during time because they did not tell any mechanism about that. First, and secondly, by allowing that policy, we will imprison citizens of developing world to low quality products, we say that. Because of increasing custom duties in developing countries, citizens became less likely to be able to afford those products, such as and enjoy the quality that may provide to people's everyday life, such as computers, cars, mobile phones, textiles, or food, and so on. Those people are now enjoying the benefits, cheap and good quality products in current status quo, but they will experience after that policy a decrease in their life quality, because the products that we consume determine the life quality, our life quality, and they will have to pay more taxes because of their products, or they has to quit to consume those products in the future, and they have to use slow computers, less comfortable cars, less delicious and less various foods. And this gives direct impact of many citizens in developing world, such as Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, South Africa, and so on. And that will give direct harm to those people's livelihood. And secondly, the other drastic change is that the second drastic change is that after increasing tariffs, tax rates, and custom duties, this will cause economic stagnation in these countries, because in current status quo, those countries have some international companies, or for example, they have an engagement to global trade, and they have some distribution services that for imported products, and there are people who working in these sectors. For example, many countries have many companies have car factories in those developing countries, and there's people who work on these places, or who work in distribution services. But if you increase tariffs and tax rates in order to give a chance to fight back local companies, those people will lose, for example, their jobs in coming future, because those companies will calculate that they cannot take benefit from those countries anymore, and they will quit. And after they quit, those the citizens of developing countries has to try to find new jobs in order to sustain their lives. But firstly, this is not certain that they can find new jobs in the future. But even if new companies found in those countries to provide such productions, they earn less salary, and they will work in bad conditions compared to their old lives, because new companies have less capital, and they aim profit maximization. Opening.
If we increase the import tariffs, for example, for these car factories located in Thailand, it won't affect the employment in this factory, because they create majority of their products for the external world, so it's about the export tariffs, not the import. So how does increasing the import tariffs affect all those prices if we're talking about the companies that produce for the Western world?
Okay. The issue is not so. The issue is the increasing cost of product that you use in your everyday life we talk about. And secondly, we believe that this also harm to rest of the world. We believe that because global trade needs a global market, and if you close, if you reduce the if you diminish the market by allowing tariffs, you give harm to economy of scale of those companies because they produce they use mass production. They can provide cheaper products to all around the world. But if you diminish the markets, also developed world and undeveloped world also has to consume more expensive products like that. For example, if you stop selling iPhone to developing countries, iPhone cannot spend more on research and development on their products, and they cannot, for example, produce iPhone 9 in the future that highly. And this causes also some job losses in developed world also. Because of those reasons, and also one more point, they say also that global companies takes all the benefit, but this is not how globalization trade works. Because if you it brings you know-how, and those companies bring you know-how, and by using this, you can get knowledge to engage with global trade. And without competition, you cannot find the motivation to improve yourself better. And because of those reasons, we are proud to close. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd now like to call on some speaker beside government.
The most important thing in this debate, and specifically for the World Trade Organization, which now one of its primary goals is to help developing countries to develop, is that we make the developing countries develop. This is the most thing in this debate, and even not because it's like written in the WTO goal and specific their vision, we just think that they're the most important because we're talking about people, like the countries which are very, very poor, where people there die of diseases, die of hunger, and we think it's very convincing that we just need to help them the most. And what Shmuel brings in this debate in relation to this answer is just, we don't need to bring their companies or create just jobs with lower salaries there. We need to create growth. The country needs to grow. The country needs to keep creating businesses. It needs to have the ability that the people there will go through lots of companies' life cycles and create the tradition that creates the experience, that create the knowledge to keep developing and then being a growth country. And at this point, when the country will actually grow, then we can start being more open and so on. We see this is actually the cycle that most of the developing countries right now are going. If you look at China, for example, if we talk at India, and if we look at Vietnam, these countries with very strong domestic companies that have like lots of rules that make the country very, very domestic, make the country make the country very, very, very focused on its own and companies, and now they become more and more open after they created this huge growth. So what Shmuel gives you in a recap? Nothing. Shmuel tells you that if I want right now to develop a country that, to develop a company that sells, I don't know, pens, okay? Or develop a company that sells papers, I don't know, something that is very, very simple. Right now, I barely have any chance on actually fighting the global country, to actually win lots of citizens in the country. Why? Because at the moment that I will be enough strong, a huge company from outside can come inside and start to sell much cheaper. It means that I can't actually develop. So I might have better quality stuff and so on as they say, but the country never develop. We never have actual growth because people don't develop the stuff they own. We don't have companies in themselves that they grown there. He told you that he goes through all the cycle of company. It shows you how in every step the stronger company from outside can come and take you it and all knowledge that we need to develop that right now is not being developed. But at the moment that we have, and notice that's very important, because at the moment that we have this knowledge, at the moment we have the growth, and we have people with more money, then the benefits that we hear for them come, and we'll go with the rebuttal right now. So what is the thing that we heard from opposition? The first thing they tell us, look, we want countries to come to companies, we want foreign companies to come and build factories and so on. Notice something is very, very important. For the country to come and create a factory, it needs to give very, very low wages. At the moment that the wages are not very, very low, then the company will just not come because it will just develop it. There are pressures to create it in the country themselves, as we see in the US right now, who's actually taking companies back to the US. And there are lots of pressures to stay inside. So at the moment, so for them to come to other countries, to like developing countries, they need to make their wages very, very low. At the moment that the wages are very, very low, then inherently the people can't spend much money. It means that they can actually grow. It means they can develop something on their own because they get low salaries. It means that they can buy lots of stuff when companies come because they have less amount of salaries. And notice that at the moment that the country actually develops and people have the benefit to create and invent stuff on their own, they have the ability to be inventive countries themselves, then all the profits are very, very important, because at this moment when they have this amount of money, then all the countries that come in and they will buy the cheaper thing, but they will still develop at the same time because they have the knowledge and experience. No, thank you. Another thing they tell us, look, we just want to create, like what will happen is what will happen is we'll have the country will focus on specific developing company. This developing company will will be successful, and all the other people will remain poor. No, thank you. What do I want to say about this case? This completely doesn't answer what we heard from Shmuel. We're not talking about creating a specific company. We're talking about creating a culture of developing country. We're talking about, just as we see right now in every country that is developed, this country that like have lots of inventive ideas, countries that have startups, countries that have all this experience and knowledge and keep creating stuff. So we're not talking about specific stuff. We're talking about creating a whole new class of people of working class, of people who have more money, people who have more knowledge of how to create stuff, and that's why we're talking about something more global. Yeah, I take it.
Yeah, in order to achieve any of that, you need some kind of starting income, and that is where your example of China and India actually falls on our side, because those were states that massively outsourced their workforce, massively allowed foreign companies to come in so they could get their money and eventually start producing their own things with that money.
So, China, Vietnam, and all of Asia is countries with huge domestic benefits. The company that are succeeding there are companies that, and also India, companies very, very big, very, very strong, with huge benefit for the whole country. China keeps cheating. Why is it mean cheating? Why do we say China is cheating? Why is it cheating? Because they keep preferring their domestic stuff over other stuff. Why do we say that all these countries, why is it growing? It's not growing because people that are working in factories making minimum wages, like actually in slavery conditions. But it's growing because they have strong companies. And what's important here is that we can see that these things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. That because all these countries can do both, we don't hear any analysis of why less countries will just not less come to create some factories in there. So if you want a foreign company to come, it will come. It will create some factories. Maybe at other fields, the local country will actually can develop and create their own companies. But in other fields, it will be foreign stuff. We don't see within it an analysis why it's going to be one of the both. What else did we heard from opposition? Okay, so we've been told about that we want to create more quality stuff, that they can buy more quality stuff. Generally, we don't think we had because if things are cheaper, they can create, they can buy, the people there can buy lower quality stuff, they buy more quality stuff. I think that first of all, there is none of us of why it's so important. Second, as we said, we're talking about an immediate step in the middle of creating strong middle class that can actually purchase this stuff, and at the moment that we have it, then we can develop. So to summarize, if we care mainly about the weakest countries, and because we want to develop, then we must create growth. Growth you create by having preference for the domestic policy, that preference for the domestic. We call you to agree to the motion.
Thank you very much, and I'd now like to call on the second speaker for closing opposition to submit the debate on their side and the debate on the other. Tell us what you think.
Two questions should be answered, or try to be answered in this debate. First, it has more clashes. How the domestic industry will develop at some point. Both of the teams, both sides have some claims about this. But I believe the more important, but so late until my friends speak, the second clash is about why a World Trade Organization should take the responsibility and what's its purposes and which methods will provide an increased world trade. I believe we have a special answer for this question. Let's start with analysis. But before that, I have one fast rebuttal, at least an answer to the question of the OG to my friend. The question is about, well, I mean, it's about import-export taxes, but we are sanctioning import taxes. But the problem is, my friend was talking about goods market. I mean, the global companies try to sell their goods all around the world, like McDonald's selling burgers in here, not just a developed country, in Turkey, for example. The thing is, but if these big companies cannot penetrate the domestic markets, cannot sell their goods, this will create a problem for them. That will I'll explain later. But if for taking his example about a car-producing factory by a foreign company in developing nation, it's our solution, not their solution, because as the argumentation says about, it's not domestic for them, but we believe this is the solution. Like a big partnership with the global companies, or letting the global companies work in your country by letting them to come here. This is what WTO tried to do throughout history. Let's start with analyzing the debate. First, the OGs, the first problem is that they very lately accept that the customs duty have to be sanctioned and obligatory for some development, because if you don't protect your domestic market from foreign goods, your domestic industry can never improve, because there will be other big companies will come into your market, will sell goods in a more cheaper way, and your domestic companies cannot penetrate the market. They don't get enough profit. So, and their claim is that in status quo, domestics are always lose. But the first problem is that why it's bad. The only answer is just, well, they create wealth in inner. But how you use this wealth, by using this wealth, how you can integrate into the world markets? No answer. How you can enlarge your market with which you can compete in the global markets? No, not enough answer. And the second thing is that the profit share is not equal to the principal argument. I don't understand. As WTO, as one of the core liberal institutions in the world, promoting free markets all around the world, why do we even care about some people getting more shares than the others? What is the harm about it? Does it badly affect the world trade or not? This creates some problem among countries? No answer. So it's not some argument that probably values in this debate. And also, opening claims that, well, they don't present any mechanism for how the domestic industries can enlarge and grow. Yeah, we accept this rebuttal from even the first speaker, and even the CG, and only CG has some answer for this. And the answer, we believe that is also problematic. OG lacks the mechanism that will develop them, because they don't have any mechanism that will even enlarge the domestic or integration for the global trade. But CG has two answers for that. The first thing is that they talk about inner competition. They say that, well, they compete in inner, but in domestic market. But the problem is that will not solve it, because first, if your companies, you can only create domestic, domestic monopoly companies that are state funded in your domestic market. Otherwise, if you let them compete freely by protecting your domestic trade, because your small domestic market will be divided into many of your domestic companies, none of them will create enough surplus and profit because they don't have a lot of people to sell in. They can just compete each other, they can't grow fast enough. But we believe that, my friend's argument about, if you let
big companies to sell their goods in your market or come to your market and they produce something. Now your domestic companies have to compete with them. And competition with global markets makes you to, in order to profit, you have to be on level, or you have to be partner with them, or you have to let them, or you can be you can be one of their local or domestic distributors. All these things can now increase or develop your domestic industry by using your domestic companies, because now by using the techniques or by competing with the global, by integrating and by engaging with the global companies and their methods, now they can compete in the global market and they can find ways of doing this. So the thing is, their second argument about from the origin, they always talk about that big companies are just stealers or they don't do anything in that. But the problem is that as a World Trade Organization, we need companies, global companies that will provide trade all around the world. Because otherwise, who will produce something and who will buy this thing? So we need their help. And first, we should not. Let's come to a conclusion that we shouldn't prevent their probable future incomes, like taking some markets out of them by letting trade sanctions, not customs duty. Second, by using these companies, when they go to the domestic market, they have find ways to work with the domestic countries, domestic industry, and try to improve this by sharing, as also OSAs, by sharing their technology, by sharing methods, or also when creates a market that people buy things. So there will be demand on your companies will meet this demand in the long run. Before that, yes.
Okay, so mechanism. If we give the domestic countries the reliefs and import tariffs, they will sell more and domestically, and they will save more capital. Then they can use this capital to optimize their production, sell more and grow, and then export to the outside world.
You can't sorry for that. The second thing is that my partner's extension about it, because in domestic goods market, you don't let the foreign goods to come your market, and you don't let your people to buy them in cheap ways, like some phones or iPhones are very high prices. Your people will not be satisfied, but they know that there are a lot of goods that in the foreign market people gives a lot of pleasure, but they desire them, but you can't let them to buy. But rather than you protect your market, and some domestic local company works and produces in a very inefficient way, as my friend told you. And this will create some social unrest. And these people, because also eliminating the global companies will decrease the unemployment, increase unemployment, because now they can't work properly in your market. And the problem is that because if your people are not so, your people will be honest about it. And now they will demand that, so they will change their voters into the against their governments. Because now there will be a problem of political instability, because you will face with governments, developing governments that can't meet the demands of society. That this is the problem, that you can't integrate with them to the global trade. But otherwise, if things were let into the free market, we believe that global trade increases much safer and more efficient way, and these are views. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of the teams postgrads. If you can wait outside, we'll call back with
Yeah, that's a fair point. I like that.
guys, if you can swing around there. It's just that way I can face you like Were you recording the round?